Um, hmm. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here today, and welcome on this day 502 of Israel's multi-front war to a critically important Ahmed webinar. As we all are aware, President Donald Trump has shattered the dominant foreign policy paradigm that has commanded Middle East policy at least since 1993. During his meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on February 4th, he had suggested the emigration of some Palestinians out of Gaza to Jordan or Egypt, which is currently under the gripping control of Hamas. We've certainly heard a response to this from much of the entrenched American foreign policy establishment, and we have heard from the governments of Jordan as well as Egypt. But we have not heard from the voices of the Gazans themselves. We have also not heard from Syrians who are now living under Hayat Tahrir al-Shams or Ahmed al-Sharaa or Abu Mahbad al-Jolani, or from the people living under the newly formed Lebanese government of Prime Minister Nawaf Salam and President Joseph Aoun. That is why this event today is so profoundly important. The Center for Peace Communications is a marvelous organization that engages directly with the people of the Arab world. Their organization provides a platform to be able to hear voices of those living in a region that might otherwise have been silenced by their totalitarian and often brutal regimes. I had written a great deal about this organization because I feel so strongly about it, but I do not want to steal the words of its wonderful founder and president, Joseph Broad. Joseph Broad is an expert on the nexus of culture and politics in Arab societies and an active presence in the region's media and policy debates. He studied Near Eastern studies and languages at Yale and Arabic and Islamic history at Princeton. He developed his Arabic to broadcast quality over a 7-year stint on Moroccan national radio and added Persian to his Arabic and Hebrew as a graduate student at the University of Tehran. Joseph is the author of 4 highly acclaimed books. His most recent book, Reclamation of Cultural Policy for Arab-Israeli Partnership, presents a strategy on how to roll back generations of anti-Semitic and rejectionist messaging in the Arab media, mosques, and schools. So without further ado, I'd first like to introduce you to Joseph Broad.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to join you all today and to share a little bit about what we do at the Center for Peace Communications. I'm joined by my distinguished colleagues, Ahed and Hadeel who work with us day in, day out. As some of you probably know, as maybe most of you know, there are many voices in Arab countries, particularly those dominated by Iran and its militias, who do not want to live under Iranian domination. They know better than anyone what it's like to live under that ideology. It brings state failure, civil strife, civil war, and bankruptcy, and they want a different future. But for various historical reasons, they have been denied a platform. These militias monopolize the public discussion, they silence all opposition, and with great brutality, they crack down on efforts to challenge their authority. So the Center for Peace Communications is concerned with engaging these brave people who want to bring change, and simply amplifying voices of dissent because they are so rarely heard by through mainstream media, and because they need to be, because it's a crucial part of understanding the dynamics of the region to recognize that these people are there and ask what can be done to help them. One of the ways in which we do this is by maintaining teams of brave activists who work with us in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, wherever there is this type of strife. And without further ado, I'll put on screen an example that would enable you to hear directly from them. These are Gazans who were asked to explain their perspective on the turmoil that they're facing and ultimately where it stems from.
حكم واقع الوضع الداخلي في قطاع غزة وسيطرة حماس على قطاع غزة كانت تستحوذ على عدد كبير من هذه المساعدات. أصبح بعد فترة من الآن بعد انهيار المنظومة الأمنية في قطاع غزة أصبحت هناك عبارة من الأشخاص المتنفذين في داخل حركة حماس لقوة حماس الأمنية أصبحوا قاطعين طرق لهذه المساعدات وعدم وصولها إلى المواطن بشكل أوسع.
أنا علاج ما بقدر أجيب ثمن علاج إلي، أنا معي جلطة ونزيف شبكية ولا أدوية ولا شيء، وببيع المساعدات وبياخذوها بقناص. إحنا في المخيم ما بخشش علينا شيء، ليش أنا ما في نص خيمة؟ الخيم أجت لنا المخيم توزعت للي بدهم إياه، وأنا في 7 أنفار في نص خيمة، بكرة لو أجى الشتاء راح أغرق.
هو يتم بيع هذه واغتنامها إلى الأسواق التجارية، سوق السوداء تباع هذه المساعدات.
اتفقنا علينا، إيش الناس استفادت؟ ولا استفدنا حاجة، بس تخربت ديارنا، واللي صايب الصايب، واللي استشهد استشهد، واللي اتدمر اتدمر.
Now, Ahed and Hadeel, you bear primary responsibility in our organization for managing our Gaza team and essentially acquiring this material and helping bring it out into public view. Give us some context about what we just saw.
Sure. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Sarah, always for all the great work that you do, and Ahmed. So as a person who grew up in Syria under a regime very similar to Hamas regime, and we were all indoctrinated to think that all of our troubles came from Israel, and all of our issues came from Israel. And then the world, outside world, they used to look at us all as Syrians, that we are pro-Assad, that all what we think about is that we want to fight Israel, we want to resist. But in reality, when I lived in Syria, this was not our dreams. This is not the issues that we want. And I had the same feeling about the people, the Gazans in Gaza. I knew that there are a lot of Gazans that refuse what Hamas is doing, and they want simply to live a normal life. I get to know Center for Peace Communications years ago, and they were already involved in work from Gaza to bring activists from Gaza, even way before October 7, to speak up, and because they don't have any platform. You have Al Jazeera, you have different media channels. They want only to show those Gazans who want to kill the Jews, who want to wage war on Israel. And I saw that what CPC is doing is a great thing. We need to show these Gazans. We started to reach to these people. I have a lot of things in common with them. Again, we both lived under the axis of resistance. We were all kind of enslaved by these regimes. And what I can tell you that a lot of these people, they simply want to live in peace. A lot of them, they have the opportunity to work in Israel, and they met Israelis for the first time in their life when Israel allowed thousands of Gazans to go and work in Israel. And for them, it was like a lottery. If you go and work in Israel, you come with money, you get back to Gaza, you build a house, you get married. And when you talk to them, they all were like really shocked being in Israel, saying that I always want to recall this story. It really touched me a lot. A Gazan that I was talking to, he was allowed to go and work in Israel. He worked at a Jewish house, and it was during the Muslim feast time. The Jewish landlord, he gave him clothes for his children. He told him, you're coming back to Gaza now. Go give them to your children, to your kids, and some toys. He went all the way to Gaza. At a Hamas checkpoint, everything that he got from his supposed enemy, the Israeli there, was confiscated by Hamas. They took it from him. And when he was telling me this, he was almost crying, telling me, look, those who are portrayed as our enemy, they thought about my children. And Hamas, they took these toys. They probably want to resell it or do something with it. Or they don't want simply to know that there are good Israelis that they are thinking about my family. And I can tell you, Joseph and Sarah, there are like hundreds of people like that I was able to interview, more than 200 people like that.
Indeed. Thank you, Ahed. And it's also the fact that in 2019, some 1,000 Gazan anti-Hamas activists turned out in street demonstrations against Hamas. And on July 30th of 2023, only a few months before October 7th, they turned out in the streets again in what some reports indicate are larger numbers. So these people are there, but when they stand up, they do so knowing that they're going to brave the gunfire and imprisonment that Hamas brings to bear, in addition to collective punishment of their families. Another very interesting disconnect between the way that much media covered the area was during the recent escalation in fighting between Lebanon and rather between Hezbollah and the IDF, which ultimately brought the degrading of the Hezbollah military capability. I saw much media coverage that suggested that most Lebanese were in solidarity with Hezbollah while it waged its attack going back to October 8th, 2023. But we all know, as people who are dealing with Lebanese and talking to them on a daily basis, that many were hoping that this campaign would succeed because they too wanted to escape the clutches of Iranian domination. Not only was that widely shared public sentiment, but there were some very brave people who were speaking out against Hezbollah in real time while the escalation was happening. In our partnership with the Free Press, we work to bring out some of these voices, and we'd like to share with you one remarkable story that epitomizes this trend.
لا أحد يتقبل هذه الحرب ولا أحد متضامن مع حزب الله. حتى الأشخاص اللي أنت شايفهم أنهم عم يفتحوا بيوتهم للعالم أو عم يعطوا دم هن منهم متقبلين حزب الله ولا حاطين حزب الله ولا مع حزب الله ولا يراهنوا على لبنة حزب الله.
Opinion polls in Lebanon show the majority opposed to Hezbollah's war on Israel and angry at Hezbollah for turning their country into a battleground on behalf of Iran. But you wouldn't know it from some Western media coverage, which has been painting a picture of Lebanese solidarity with Hezbollah. Maryam Majdoulin al-Laham is a Lebanese Sunni media personality who is ubiquitous on Lebanese television, and we asked for her take on the present war.
يعني أنا كسنية قبل الشيعي العربي عم يدفع الأثمان وإيران تحصد الغنائم على دمه ونحن عم نقتل وإيران عم بتفاوض. نحن عم ننزح وإيران عم بتفاوض. نحن عم نخسر وإيران عم بتفاوض. نحن ندفع الأثمان والشيعة العرب على فكرة قبلنا. هل فعلا اليوم بعد فيه قدرة إنه نستوعب مثلا إنه غزة أو الملف غزة ممكن ينحل عبر الملف اللبناني أو على دماء اللبنانيين؟ هذا ابتزاز للناس. نحن لن نسكت لحزب الله. نحن لن نقف ونتحدث فقط عن هذه الصواريخ التي ترمى على رؤوسنا. سنتحدث وسنعلي الصوت عن هذا الذي تسبب برمي هذه الصواريخ على رؤوسنا.
Now, Hadeel Awais, you work directly with so many of these brave people in Lebanon every day. Can you tell us more about Maryam, about the circumstances under which a woman takes to television and stands up and says these things while her country is at war?
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Sarah, for having us. So, Maryam is a very brave journalist and activist who spoke up against Hezbollah, even when Hezbollah was in its most powerful days. She was sued by a judge that's very close to Hezbollah. She went into hiding. She was also threatened by Hezbollah mob to be killed in Lebanon streets. And one of the good outcomes for the Israeli campaign against Hezbollah that Maryam can now move freely in Lebanon. She doesn't have these charges against her in Lebanese courts anymore. A lot of people like Mariam, journalists, activists, politicians who were afraid, who were oppressed for years by Hezbollah, who was the leader de facto in Lebanon, are now feeling that they are having a chance. And the Israeli campaign against Hezbollah gave Lebanon a chance to become again Lebanon that they knew, where people enjoyed some sorts of political freedoms and social freedoms. From my interaction through CPC with the activists on the ground in Lebanon and also in Syria, I can tell that one of the most prepared communities in the Arab world for peace with Israel, for normalization with Israel, are the Lebanese and the Syrian people, because they got enough from what they saw and what they witnessed during the last decade or two, from the so-called axis of resistance, the Assad regime, Hezbollah, Iranian-backed militias who came from Iraq to Syria to kill Syrians. So I see a lot of hopeful examples like Mariam in Lebanon and Syria. And today, because the axis of resistance is weaker in the region, I think we have a great opportunity and great responsibility as well to push for peace and to push for normalization between the neighbors, the people of the same region.
Thank you so much, Hadeel. And indeed, it's interesting that you brought up Syria as well, because there's a lot of uncertainty about the future direction of this new government. On the one hand, they're shedding much of the radicalism of al-Qaeda in Iraq. On the other hand, there are indications of their maintaining a fundamentally Islamist orientation, while they plainly are showing technocratic rigor in trying to rebuild the national grid and doing other things that are welcomed by the population. But indeed, as you say, the aspiration of many Syrians to turn a new page, reconsider all of the assumptions that were imposed on them by the Assad regime, including the question of relations with Israel, is there. And I'd like to show a remarkable example, and you're going to see it now for the first time. We're about to bring this out to a larger audience shortly. This is the head of the new journalists, the newly appointed head of the Syrian Journalists Union. And Hadeel, you interviewed him a few days ago, and you asked him a very interesting question, considering that for years, for decades, journalists' unions in the Arab world were used as a tool to ostracize journalists who communicated in any way with Israeli citizens. So let's have a quick look at what he says in response to a provocative question put to him by Hadeel.
اليوم إذا صحفي سوري كان بالنقابة ولنقول اشتغل مع صحيفة إسرائيلية أو صحيفة إيرانية أو صحيفة بدولة يعني ما في سلام بينه وبين سوريا، هل لازم يتعاقب؟ شو لازم يكون الرد؟
للأمانة سؤال صعب، سؤال ملغوم. ما رح جاوب عليه بشكل كامل، ولكن أنا برجع بقول لك أنا مع حرية الصحافة، وهذا الصحفي اللي رح يشتغل مع وسيلة إعلامية إيرانية أو روسية أو حتى إسرائيلية، إذا رح يشتغل ضمن نطاق عمل الصحفي الحر اللي رح ينقل الوقائع كما هي بدون أن يكون له أجندات، أنا بالنسبة لي لا أرى في ذلك أي مانع.
Now, Hadeel, that is really something you don't see every day. Were you surprised at that answer, or were you expecting it? Tell us about what you felt as that conversation was happening.
So when I interview new people in charge in Syria, I always try to explore their opinion about regional issues. And of course, one important aspect is the future relation with Israel. We share big borders with Israel, a lot of mutual interests. So I like to ask them about Israel. And here, this guy is in charge of reconstruction of media entities in Syria. So I asked him about media. What if a journalist wants to work with an Israeli outlet? His answer was surprising to me in a positive way. And it gives me some positive indications that these new people who are becoming now part of the new government at least they don't have directions from the people in charge now in Damascus to be hostile against Israel, to attack Israel, to say the things that we used to hear from the Assad regime. I imagine myself asking this question to someone in charge of media in the Assad regime. He would answer me that Israel is the enemy. This person should be sued. This person should go to jail. This is how we lived in Syria. This is how Syria was. So this is a positive indication, and I hope it's true, and I hope we see it on a larger scale in Syria.
Thank you, Hadeel. Now, Sarah, you introduced this discussion mentioning Trump's highly controversial ideas that he expressed a couple of weeks ago about Gaza, including the idea that Gazans might be resettled as part of a plan, short-term, medium, long-term, unclear, that would somehow necessitate humanitarian resettlement in order that the area be rebuilt. Now, we spoke to people about that as well over the 36 hours after Trump's rather dramatic press conference. And we asked them what they thought of this plan. And again, what they said flew in the face of much coverage that indicated that it was axiomatic that Palestinians in Gaza would stay in Gaza under any circumstances, including a situation in which they were offered the opportunity to migrate safely to somewhere else. And this is what they said.
لها سافر أنا من عندها سافر لأنه هان ما ضلش حياة هان الحياة انعدمت يعني طلع أنت المنظر ما ضلش في حياة هان بالمرة أنا بطلب من ترامب نفسه يهجرنا زي ما طلب وأنا هبقى أول واحد ههاجر
إذا مصر ما بدهاش تطلع فينا ولا الأردن ولا السعودية ولا غيره ولا غيراته إنه على سبيل إحنا نضلنا مقيمين في بلادنا هلكونا. بالنسبة للشعب المصري الشقيق والشعب الأردني للملك عبد الله إنه يفتح المعابر للشباب الخريجين للجرحى للمرضى لكبار السن اللي بيطلعوا يتعالجوا.
ساعتها الواحد خلص برضى بالأمر الواقع، برضى بالأمر الواقع يعني هجرة لأنه بده يعيش، بده يعيش في بلد تصونه وتشيله، يعني الواحد يرفع راسه فيها البلد إذا بلدنا مش مدورة علينا وين نروح إحنا؟
يعني طب أنت شو بتوجه رسالة مثلا للشعب المصري والشعب الأردني؟ هل بتقولوا مثلا يعيدوا النظر في قضية فتح المعابر؟
أنا بوجه لهم يعيدوا النظر في قضية فتح المعابر، في قضية إعمار غزة، وفي قضية في كل حاجة يعيدوا النظر، لأنه هيك إحنا ما بزبطش، يعمروا لنا غزة وإحنا بنعيش في غزة زي ما كنا.
Now, those types of responses may be an epiphany for some, but at the same time, it stands to reason. What these people are saying is that they're human beings like anyone else, and that when there is a situation of war, they want safe haven. It's not a question of being forced to emigrate. They simply want to live in a place, perhaps temporarily, in all likelihood, wanting to have the opportunity to return to Gaza, where they could live safely. It's the same instinct that led millions of Syrians and Ukrainians to migrate during those countries' terrible wars. Why need the response to that human impulse on the part of the region and the world be any different than in the cases of the Syrian and Ukrainian wars? In fact, on the eve of October 7th, an opinion poll was released by a Palestinian polling group indicating that 1/3 of the population wanted to emigrate. That was pre-October 7th, when there was still a semblance of continuity in daily life. And it's quite clear that the number increased dramatically during the tragic war that followed October 7th, and probably climaxed over the 6 to 7 weeks after the most recent ceasefire, when Gazans had an opportunity to visit the north and see what had happened to their homes. So one of the things that we learned by talking to Gazans now is that, contrary to much coverage of the issue of the Trump ideas, It's not really a question of forced migration and so on. Obviously, some would want to stay in Gaza, but a very large number, if given the opportunity to migrate and find safe haven, would take Egypt, Jordan, or other countries up on it. We've seen some people, I mean, there's obviously a spectrum, people indicating that if they were offered asylum in Europe, that would be a much bigger draw than being offered asylum in, as one person put it, land of famine like Somalia. There'd be very few takers for a place like that. If they were told they could migrate and never come back, that would fetch much less interest and comfort than if they were told that there's going to be reconstruction and there's a temporary situation in which they can live safely elsewhere and then eventually come home. So again, it's a very simple proposition that we bring, that let's not ignore the voices of the people who are most affected by these global policy deliberations. Let's not assume that we know what they think. And also, let's not leave it to hardline extremist ideologues who rule those areas with an iron fist to speak on their behalf. Now, Ahed, you indicated the first thing that you mentioned when we spoke was your personal history and your empathy with the Gazans you work with every day, based on what you experienced as a young person in Syria. Do you want to tell us a little more about your activism in the early years of the Civil War, your jailing, the circumstances under which you left, and what lessons you draw from all that?
Yeah, of course. In 2000, I was jailed in Syria even prior to the Arab Spring. It was in 2006. I was a member of a small student organization that was active in Damascus University, and simply we were advocating for a more margin of freedom in the country. And one of the reasons that encouraged us to carry on and organize ourselves was in Syria at a period of time we used to have students coming from the Golan Heights. The Israeli government were allowing those Druze in the Golan Heights to come and study in Damascus University. And Syria back then was more of a social country. We all used to dress like each others, and we have these Golani students coming dressed up in very fashioned clothes, having nice like outfit. And we're always curious, how do they get that? We approach them, talk to them, they say, from Israel. I mean, like, okay, you can go to Israel? They say, yeah, we live in Israel. We can go to Tel Aviv, we can go to Jerusalem. And we start to learn more about Israel from them. And basically in Syria, under Assad regime, always were bringing the issue of the Golan Heights as one of the reasons why we need to hate Israel. But ironically, you are talking to people from the Golan telling you, we are living a much better life than your life. We look at how they dressed, the amount of money they make in Israel. You cannot compare it to Syria. And moreover, we heard from them about their daily life. So that encouraged us to start to search more about the truth. Is really Assad regime fighting Israel for our sake, for us to be much more happy and have less pain? And it turned out, no, that's all conspiracy theories, and that they don't want to do any reform. They don't want to do any development in the country. They want to accumulate wealth for themselves under the pretext of fighting Israel. And this is why I would say, although we have many reasons to worry about the new rulers of Syria, I think removing Assad regime could be a good step, even though we have now a Sunni rulers in Syria, that this country could sign peace with Israel. All the Arab Sunni countries, a lot of the Arab Sunni countries, they signed peace with Israel. But if we look at the other hand, Hezbollah, Assad regime, and Alawite regime, and the Iraqi militia, which is a Shia militia, even Hamas is getting funding from Iran, although they are Sunni organization. They are the one who are championing the idea of resistance against Israel because they want to show the Sunni world that, look, we are on the front lines fighting your war in order to get legitimacy in these countries. And now all of this, the mask has been removed, and people experienced the suffering, Syrians and Lebanese, from these Iranian-backed militias. And you're talking about up to 5 million Syrians who left Syria. We saw what happened in Sednaya prison. I mean, we never heard about that after the Nazi Holocaust and what happened. I mean, like now in 2024, 2025, seeing all what we saw in Sednaya prison, how they are treating prisoners, the amount of people that they were killed in a country like Syria, it's unbelievable. So there are something that I'm so happy, and at the same time, I'm very worried. I'm so happy because I suffered personally from Assad regime, and I'm worried as a person who is secular, who is not Muslim. I'm not Muslim, so it scares me to have a jihadist-like organization ruling over Syria. But to be quite objective at the same time, there is much bigger margin than when we used to live under Assad regime. And
Thank you, Ahmed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So, Hadeel, obviously, a lot of the material that we've shared thus far being subtitled into English, some in partnership with the Free Press, much of it has gone viral on its own and been covered in American and European media. But the other half of what we do is about communicating with audiences in these environments in Arabic. And you are in charge of the media outlet we've launched, Jusur, which means bridges. It's kind of like a Radio Liberty, in the way that Radio Free Europe reached audiences in the Iron Curtain. This is a virtual broadcast on all social media platforms into the Iran-dominated orbit. The question I'd like to ask you is, can you share a little bit more about Jusur? Tell us about what you're trying to do on that network, and tell us about the kinds of responses that you're getting from your growing audience.
Yeah, so the idea behind Jusur is because we simply believe that millions and millions, not only in the Middle East, but also around the world, speak the Arabic language. It's one of the fastest growing languages around the world. A lot of Arabic language speakers are now in colleges around the world, in campuses here in the United States, in European countries. And these people are being fed into false information, ideological information from big Arabic news outlets who are pushing them in the direction to hate Israel, to hate the United States, to have sympathy with extremist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. And what we are doing in Jusur is trying to show the Arab audiences and try to interact with the younger generation in the Arab world in an attempt to push them and to show them the other direction, the productivity, the positive side of the relations with the West, interacting with the United States, normalization with Israel. And what we are getting is a lot of great feedback, a lot of excitement from reporters on the ground in the Arab world who are working with us, who are bringing for us brave voices from Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and other places in the region. And we are growing. We are growing rapidly. It's been 1 year since CPC launched Jusur, and so far we have tens of millions of viewers on all our platforms, and we are doing all sorts of coverage. We make interviews with the celebrities who are also showing openness to our ideas, to our political leanings. We are interviewing younger people now in Syria and other places. I'm very excited about this project, and I think it's showing a big success so far.
Thank you, Hadeel. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah. Sarah, you've been watching and taking all this in. Do you have any reactions? And of course, if you'd also like to ask any of us about the work, we'd be glad to hear from you about that.
Yes, I have tons of reactions. I should also say that just tomorrow, Saudi Arabia is going to be hosting a 5 nation-state conference with Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, the United Emirates, and of course, Saudi Arabia to talk about the rebuilding of Gaza. And I know that in terms of Gaza, what you do is amplify the voices. There's no way to get an accurate poll of how many people would like to keep their foothold in quote unquote Palestine and stay in Gaza, and how many people would like to immigrate. But do you have any kind of guesstimate based on the poll before October 7th of what percentage of the population, if there were humanitarian corridors to exit through, how many Gazans would like to immigrate?
Well, I'll take that and say that, first of all, as I mentioned previously, there was a poll done by Khalil Shikaqi's organization in Ramallah of people in Gaza and the West Bank, which, according to the polling report, was conducted on the eve of October 7th, literally over the couple of weeks prior to October 7th, in which they asked, do you want to emigrate or do you want to stay? And about a third of Gazans said that they wanted to emigrate. The number was around 44% among the younger set. They cited corruption, brutality, and other issues related to Hamas as a governing actor in the Strip as the reason why they wanted to leave. By the way, there was illegal emigration. That is, Hamas tried to forcibly block people from leaving, and many young people tried to make a perilous journey by sea. Some of them died, drowned on the way, and there were funerals, group funerals for these people that turned into spontaneous anti-Hamas protests, and that was happening in 2022 and 2023. It's quite clear that the number on the eve of October 7th has swelled since then. Again, it's an understandable and natural human instinct. There isn't polling data available. By the way, the issue of polling is inherently problematic in a traditional society, and that's a separate issue. But what we do is we talk to hundreds of Gazans, and we talk to them at great length. And so the question of polling slants and manipulation by armed groups is less of an issue in the kind of qualitative research we do. And so, unsurprisingly, what we see is that it is a majority of the population that would leave if they had the opportunity to do so safely and find safe haven, and that if the borders were in fact opened, it would be a kind of a moment that looks like the fall of the Berlin Wall. There would be a massive rush on that border. And as one put it to us in a video we'll be releasing shortly, if there were even a single crack in the border wall, there would be a massive outflow of people rushing to break it. So that is what we have found.
Okay. We have had a number of questions flowing in from our audience. One is, and I think Hadeel and Ahmed, maybe you're best equipped to answer this. How do we overcome the years and years of indoctrination that much of the Arab Street has been exposed to?
Most of this indoctrination has happened at a time where we have only one TV channel, one educational system. We did not have this tech world where everybody has a smartphone and can see and watch what's really going on. Of course, this flow of technology also has helped the extremist group because now they can reach to more people and send these messages for more people. I think the flow of information, the Arab world, they suffer from years, decades of a misrepresentation of Israel. Again, as I told you, when people were able from Gaza to go to Israel, they changed internally. They've seen that this is a country going well, everything is good. They can speak Arabic in Israel. Like when they see signs in Arabic in Israel, they know that the life of the Arab in Israel is not as portrayed in the Arab media. So information is key for that. And Israel and the friends of Israel need to play a big role in helping to spread information in the Arab to the Arab world in the Arab language to help the people going back from all of this indoctrination that they went through.
I think you're doing a great deal more than some of the other channels that we know of that we've all appeared on in the past, to amplify these voices and to know that there are alternatives. Hadeel, I think you're doing an amazing service. Do you feel from your personal experience that there has been some positive response to this new vehicle of communication?
Yes, I think we have a lot of positive feedback. We have a lot of people in the region, especially places where they experienced wars, they experienced the impact of the militias backed by Iran. The younger generation is fed up from these conflicts and they want peace, they want normalization with Israel, especially that the recent countries who normalized with Israel are the most successful countries in the region, like UAE, Bahrain. These are the places where the Arab youth in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq think of when they want to change their life for better. They think of immigrating to these countries, and when they say a great model like UAE normalizing with Israel, they simply think that it's a good thing, it's a positive thing, and they want it to be repeated in their country as well.
Excellent, excellent. Have you consider the fact that in Western Europe and in the United States, many of the Arab people that migrate here take up the charge of boycott BDS, and are you somewhat afraid of having more migration from the Arab world into Western Europe and the United States?
Let
Yeah, Joseph, you want to answer
I'll
that?
make a point or two about that. First of all, indeed, in our experience, there is a trend where diaspora politics are often more radical than the public opinion within these environments, because it's easier for people far away, an ocean away, to look at conflicts in the places whence they came in sort of the way that people look at football games, you know, one team versus another and so on, because they don't have to manage the day-to-day challenges of life in a time of war. Whereas there tend to be more nuanced and moderate views that develop as a natural reaction to extremist governance and the pragmatic challenges of a conflict. So when Syrians moved en masse to Germany, for example, there were smart people arguing that there needed to be programs and proactive efforts through education and through other things, to integrate these people into the society. And Germany did not organize to do that in a serious way, nor did other European countries. There are all kinds of reasons why that didn't happen, ranging from the ideological to the inherently distracted nature of democratic governments that don't really do these things very well. So I think that you know, the question of immigration is related to absorption and education. When you have a population that has been denied critical thinking skills by authoritarian regimes, which deliberately, through schooling and authoritarian schooling, sought to make them vulnerable to manipulation, you have to introduce those skills. You have to understand the informational environment that they were inhabiting and grew up in, and ask, how do you make that transition? If it's done right, then some Gazans could inject a certain realism into their own diaspora communities and so, sorry, we just got off a boat from Gaza, and the way that you're describing Hamas is insane. In fact, we've released video of Gazans calling on the protesters in the West to choose between supporting Hamas and supporting the Palestinians who suffer under the rule of Hamas. So the question really depends on circumstances and the way that host governments engage any refugees whom they bring in.
Right. But then we would have to embark on an entire re-education campaign with adults to be able to provide them with these critical thinking skills. And there's a certain age in which ideas are formed, and we'd have to shatter a lot of the premises upon which these ideas are based, and that's a huge process. So
It is absolutely, it's very challenging. And to be clear, we're not a think tank. We are not formulating policies or recommendations about the way these things should be done. We're simply making observations based on policies that others are initiating and instituting. And what we're introducing to you is what we're learning about the way people on the ground process these ideas. And it's really up to policymakers to decide what they're going to do.
Right, right. In the meantime, we see that Egypt has blocked, the corridors of exit, as has Jordan, and it's a very, very difficult situation for many Gazans who are hungry to leave. Do you think that this is a very difficult question, do you think that they want to leave only for pragmatic reasons to be able to rebuild their lives and have better futures for their families? Or do you think there's an ideological basis to this, just judging from all of the interviews that you've conducted?
Do you want to take that as our Gaza portfolio manager?
It's a tough question, but many of the people, especially those who are educated, intellectual that I talk to, who are in Gaza, they would tell me, listen, if we end up being in Egypt and in Gaza or in Jordan, you're not solving the problem, you are postponing the problem, because we as Palestinians, I'm quoting him here, we suffered in Jordan and we suffered in Egypt at the same time. There is an issue in Jordan, some sort of tension between Jordanians from Palestinian background, Jordanian from a Bedouin background. And he compared it to Palestinians who immigrated to European countries, to Western countries. He told me, when do these people remember Palestine? Once a year. They have a day they celebrated, they call it Yom al-Ard, the day of the land or something like that. And then later they worry about their children, they worry about their work. But if you keep them in neighboring to Israel, under country and regime that could exploit this situation to use it as a betting cards on different files, we are not solving the problem. Look, the Palestinian who came to Lebanon since 1948, they still feel they are Palestinian because there are discrimination in Lebanon and they are always pointing to them as Palestinian. Although I had in my class many in Syria, many people who are Palestinian, but we identify them as Palestinian, but they were born in Syria. Their father was born in Syria, and they've never seen the land of their grandfather. And they tell you we are Palestinian. Why? Because these countries played in a very systematic way to tell them, you are Palestinian, you don't belong here, you should get back to your country. So get them away. If you want to help Gazans to leave out of Gaza, because a lot of them, they want to leave Gaza, they don't want to stay either under Hamas or under all the destruction. Don't keep them around Gaza. Let them go to Europe, to Western country, Australia, but not around Israel.
Sarah,
you
with
have
apologies,
to
I need to jump because I'm going to make a train, but obviously I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Ahed and Hadeel.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for everything that you're doing. You're making an
Sure.
amazing contribution by amplifying these
Our
voices.
pleasure.
Really.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
Be
you.
well. Bye.
Yes. So, Hadeel, you have conducted hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with Gazans. How would you respond to that question? Do you think they just, you know, pragmatically need to build a better lives for their families, and are still ideologically driven towards Palestine? Or do you think that, they just want a clean break?
Absolutely. I hear from a lot of people that they want to leave Gaza. They always wanted to leave since the beginning of the war, October 7th. What many people, maybe here in the United States or Europe, don't know is that there were Gazans who paid thousands of dollars per person to leave. That means like a family would cost $25,000-$30,000 just to leave Gaza. So the fact that they are paying this amount of money before the war to leave Gaza is giving us a strong indication that people were looking for a better life, just like the same situation. I was in the war in Syria, and all I was thinking about is just to leave. Of course, there is the ideological part where people are hating the idea that Trump is telling them, if you leave, you can't go back. But also those who have families, those who are young, who want to start their life, they want to leave, to start from the beginning, especially after now the ceasefire, when people went back to their houses and they saw this destruction. They saw that it's very hard to start from the beginning, especially that they are not certain if Hamas is gone forever now or they're still there, because there are also a lot of people in Gaza are terrified when they saw Hamas militiamen in their uniform with their arms during the ceasefire in the streets. So this is terrifying for them and pushing them even more to choose to leave. So in short, from my observation, from my discussions with a lot of Gazans, I believe that at least maybe if the population of Gaza is a bit over 2 million, I believe that 700,000, 800,000 will be willing to leave immediately if there is a country that's welcoming them. And the people are mad from the fact that their right to travel is becoming a political issue and a source of political conflict between Trump and Arab leaders.
Muted, Sarah. We cannot hear you. You're muted, Sarah.
Thank you. So right now there's a newly formed government of Prime Minister Nawaf Salam and Joseph Aoun in Lebanon, and we have seen at least video footage of it looks like hundreds of people coming back to southern Lebanon waving Hezbollah flags and having pictures of Hassan Nasrallah. Do you think that the situation in Lebanon can stabilize? And again, I know you're not a polling firm, but have you heard from voices of people in Lebanon who are absolutely overcome with frustration about the tightening grip that Hezbollah has had over the government for so many years?
So, Sarah, before I came to the United States, I used to live in Lebanon. I lived there almost for 2 years. And at that time, we used to see how Hezbollah was even controlling the army, controlling the government. At the instant when Hezbollah, armed man, they attacked many areas in Beirut, trying to terrify their opponents, the Lebanese army was standing still and looking at them without doing anything. Now, the change that has happened just a few days ago, Hezbollah protesters, they blocked the road to the airport because in the part of Beirut where Hezbollah population live, it's very close to the airport. So they can easily blackmail the government by blocking the road to the airport. And it's the only airport that they have in the country. And for the first time, we saw the Lebanese army holding batons and beating these rioters that were burning fires on the street and removing them away. So the idea is Hezbollah get defeated, not only defeated he's degraded very much to a level that he cannot pose a big threat even to the Lebanese dissidents there. But however, in the Arab world, we have a culture of denial. They don't admit that they were defeated. In 1970, when in Yom Kippur War, when Syria was defeated by Israel, we used to celebrate 1970 as a victory day in Syria. It's a day off, people go into the street, and although Syria lost many lands at that time in the war, and Israel was announced as the winner in this war, same goes in Hezbollah. They don't want to admit that, so they do a show off of showing flag in the streets in Lebanon, but they know that they are split, they are very defeated, and thanks for Israel, they read the word from a criminal organization like Hezbollah that was terrorizing the Lebanese, which led eventually to the collapse of Assad regime.
Hadeel, would you like to add anything at all to that?
Yeah, just I agree with Ahed. What they are trying to do is showing muscles, showing that we didn't lose, because big aspect of Hezbollah, the idea behind Hezbollah and these militias was not just to terrorize Israel and attack Israel, but also to terrorize the locals, to dominate the political scene in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq. And now the fact that they were destroyed by Israel, they want at least to keep a grab on the locals, on the community inside Lebanon, and they want to show the Lebanese people who are celebrating the defeat of Hezbollah that, see, we are still here, we are still exist. And I think this is what Hamas is trying to show also when they show up bearing arms until today after this war that where they are almost defeated, I believe. They want at least to maintain their presence. They are trying, but I think they are so weak. And if there is still international interest to help Lebanon, to help Syria, to help Gazans, to totally defeat these militias, we won't see that anymore.
What you both are doing is really beyond value. It reminds me very much of what Radio Free Europe used to do, to go behind the Iron Curtain and talk to Soviet refuseniks and dissidents and amplify their voices to be heard. Yeah, I know it is impossible when you're living under a totalitarian regime to get accurate polling data, but to amplify these voices of people who have been muzzled by their governments, that must get out, I think is really wonderful, and is really a privilege and an honor to be able to partner with you, to be able to use your videotape footage when we go to Capitol Hill every day, and to educate members of Congress about these wonderful voices from within the Arab world that feel trapped by the repressive regimes. Thank you both so much. And I should make a plug. My board has always told me to make a plug for Ahmed, because we actually right now, as I am doing this, part of my team is on Capitol Hill meeting with members of Congress, which is what we do every day. And I also would like you to go to the Center for Peace Communications website and to please support what they do as well. It is a wonderful, wonderful organization. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having us, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.